Welcome to Geek Devotions, kind of, sort of. I'm Francisco Ruiz, doing the Geek Devotions this time. And currently we're in the middle of summer serials. Thank you to Dallas and Celeste for letting me be a part of this. They're doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like the 90s movies. And right now they're up to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. I think the subtitle for that is Turtles in Time. And so that's a movie. Okay, full disclosure, I haven't seen Turtles in Time in a long time. It's been years and years. But for those that don't know, here's the synopsis according to the back of the DVD. America's most awesome amphibians are back, and this time their history in this motion picture adventure. When a magic scepter accidentally transports April back through time to 17th century Japan, the boys take off in hot pursuit, cowabungling their way out of the sewers right into Samurai-orama. Wow. Now they must battle the evil Lord Norinaga to reclaim the magic scepter that will bring them back below the subways of New York City. So join the heroes on the half shell in a totally turtle-rific trip through time the entire family can enjoy. Or the entire family will love. Apparently, I was hoping you would enjoy it, but no, that's not the case. Yeah, so what I remember of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 was not a lot of great stuff. I remember thinking, okay, wow, I love the first Turtles. The second Turtles was pretty good. Third Turtles, oh, they're time traveling? I love time travel. This will be great. And then I watched it. And, it was kind of dark then. I didn't really know what to think as I saw these really horribly done foam suits. And sure, Corey Feldman was back, but as the voice of Donatello, and he was my favorite, but it was a dark time. Memories of them going back to Japan and being so kiddie, so campy. I didn't know. I don't want to remember. But it is important to remember these things. Theater aside, it's important to remember. In fact, what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to, like I said, I went back through my memories of how God has shown up in my life, or specifically in my podcasting life. And it's important to remember because it's so easy for us to forget. And one of the things that God asked the ancient Israelites to do from time to time was actually build monuments or memorials so that they would remember, because they forget and we forget so easily. So I'm going to start us off with some scripture from Joshua 4. This is verse 5 through 7, and this is after Joshua and the Israelites have gone into the promised land. God instructs Joshua to have 12 stones set as a memorial. And so this is how Joshua 4, 5 through 7, the ESV translation goes. And Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, 'What do those stones mean to you?' Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." So that was a memorial for the Israelites to remember how God brought them into the promised land. And here is sort of my memorial of how God has shown up in my life for podcasting. Okay, so here we go. I want to take you back 1 year ago, 2017. It's sort of late last year. I was listening to this podcast called The Spirit Blade Underground, which was part of Christian Geek Central, put up by Peter Franson. For the last several years, he's been doing this charity event called Extra Life, which is a 24-hour charity stream where you raise money for a local children's hospital. And he's been putting that invite out for several years now. And this year, I felt like God was saying, you could try this. Why don't you do this? I know you want to, Francisco. And I definitely did. And every year before, I'm like, I can't do that. How am I going to do that? But this year, I actually, I thought about it. I asked my wife, Christy, hey, what do you think? And we talked about how maybe 24 hours was out of the question, but maybe 5 or 6 hours. So we worked on that. And God showed up big time. I had an initial goal of raising $100. I thought, that seems manageable. I could probably raise $100 for the kids. And God answered that right away. Someone donated $100. And I'm like, okay, God, that's awesome. I guess I'll change my goal now to $200. Again, God made someone else just donated $200. I'm like, what is this? How is this happening? I said it one more time to $300, and it wasn't another $100 donation, but that was quickly met. And I'm like, wow, this is ridiculous. So 3 times I set my goal higher, and God was like, you're saying this too low, man. What are you doing? So it was amazing to see God show up that quickly. I said it after that to something like 500, and I didn't reach that, but already God had shown me plenty how he was in this. That's how I interpret it anyways. So getting to do that stream last November, I believe it was, really, I had streamed off and on little bits before that, but this really solidified a desire to stream. I'm like, wow, this was enjoyable. I really like this. So I began streaming. It became a passion of mine. And God has provided me more opportunities to stream for other ministries. For instance, streaming for Geek Devotions. Got to do their King of Monsters month stream, which was really fun. I'm getting to do co-streams with Consuming Fire Gaming. I'm getting to do a charity stream this coming August with Victims of Villains to help with suicide prevention. It's been really, really amazing how God has allowed me to use this talent, this gifting, and this knowledge to do other things for him, which has been really cool. So, and that's actually led to me being able to be an affiliate on Twitch, which, long story short, is a way for me to get a little bit of extra income to help support Retro Rewind Podcast and just continue to grow it. But for those of you in the chat probably know bits and pieces of this story already. I actually want to take you back even before all this. Back to 2006. Yeah, that's almost, what was that? If I do the math right, 12 years ago? Yeah, something like that. All right, so take you back 12 years ago. I was newly married, and I had probably heard about podcast. I've probably listened to a podcast, but I probably didn't know what it was. It was just some MP3 online with people talking like, I guess this is interesting. I don't know. But at that time, and I was on iTunes, and I was looking for something having to do with sex and God. Again, I was newly married. I want to know what God had to say about sex. Typical guy. And this was before me really having a grasp of what Song of Solomon was and things like that. So I do a search, and I was thinking maybe an audiobook or something would come up. And for whatever reason, it seems like a lot of not great stuff for me to see would have come up in a search like that. But what comes up is this sermon series from a church in New Jersey, of all places, called Liquid Church. I'm like, oh, what's this? Oh, it's free. Oh, I can listen to it right now? Okay, let me download that. So I download, I listen to the sermon series, and then I subscribe, and I am now a podcast listener. Back in 2006, I was listening on my commute, thinking, man, this is really cool. This is so cool. I get to listen to messages from God, not only on Sundays, but throughout the week, and this is really engaging teaching. So, not as a diss to my then pastor, but So now I'm going to fast forward from 2006 to 2011, 5 years later, and 7 years ago from now. Let's not do math throughout this whole thing. You can track. You can look at a calendar. So 5 years later, I'm an avid podcast listener, And I'm listening to both podcasts about like affiliate marketing, trying to learn how maybe I can make money online, and also just podcasts from what I call normal guys and girls, like just people, no-name people, but talking about stuff that I'm passionate about, like a podcast called Starcast, which is about StarCraft 2, another podcast called The Sci-Fi Christian, which keep that in your memory banks because they'll play a big part later. So I'm just listening to this podcast. I start to think, you know what? Maybe this is something I could do. Maybe I could do a podcast, but what would I do it about? I don't really know. And then that was early 2011. Then late 2011, God blessed me and my wife with getting pregnant with our first child. So that is like, oh, that's what I could do a podcast on, being a dad, and sort of being a dad and this new in these early 2010s and what that's going to be like. And so the Dad's Voice podcast was born, and the rest is history. But wait a second, Francisco. Dad's Voice? This is Retro Rewind podcast. What's this Dad's Voice thing? Glad you asked. We actually have to go back to 1999 now. However many years ago that was. Almost 20. That's ridiculous. So, 20 years ago, I go off to college, Cal State Northridge, and really God shows up. I mean, that's what happens, because I walk into my dormitory. There's 3 other guys there. One of them's this tall dude wearing like long jean shorts, like a blue or white shirt. I can't remember, glasses. Nice coiffed hair. And he introduces himself. His name's Paul. I'm like, oh, hey, Paul. And we talk. Oh, we're both military brats. That's cool. Oh, Army. Okay, I'm Air Force. Nice. And for those of you who are fans of the podcast, you no doubt have guessed this is Paul, the Master Interrupter Powers I'm talking about. Him and I really hit it off. We talked movies. We talked God. I really credit his friendship with what really crystallized or refined my faith in God. I've been a Christian most of my life, and I shared in a previous streams Pause in God my journey to faith. And like I said, there is really having those conversations with Paul, where God really revealed, yeah, I am real. This is true, and I am relational. Relationships are important. So God shows up, helps me meet my best guy friend Paul. We end up living together through college. We're best men at each other's weddings, and it's great. But then 9 years later, this is 2008, me and Christy, again, we've been married a few years now, we decided we want to move up to Oregon. We were living in California, move up to Oregon, just speed of life. But unfortunately, that left me and Paul's relationship. We became further and further apart. I mean, we'd call one another every so often. When we visited California once, and we definitely hung out with them, but it was just getting fewer and far between when we would chat. And I really missed my friendship with him. So back to 2012, my daughter's born. I'm doing this Dad's podcast, but I'm finding it's a grind. I mean, even with my wife helping me, and it's hard to get guests. It's hard to invest in all this energy into it. But I'm still trying to do it. And it's almost like a flash of inspiration. Again, I attribute it to God. He puts in my head, Francisco, why don't you try, every time you talk with Paul on the phone, you're always talking about movies. So why don't you see if he maybe wants to do a podcast about movies? Talk about that. And then that'll be a way for you guys to reconnect and stay connected consistently. So I talked to Paul about that, shared my idea. I did a sort of a prototype episode with my wife to sort of flesh it out. Then me and Paul did our first episode on Superman 3. And And so that is how the Retro Rewind podcast was born. Unfortunately, Dad's Voice podcast faded, but rising from the ashes of that came Retro Rewind podcast 152 episodes later. But that's not the end. How did we get from there to 2017, like Christian Geek Central and all that? I mean, sure, you started this podcast, but how does that link you to Christian Geek Central, and what does that all, and how did you meet Geek Devotions, and how'd that all happen? Well, let me tell you. As if you'd expect anything else. 2013 happens. We've been podcasting for about a year. And you remember back in 2011 when I told you that I was listening to the Sci-Fi Christian? Well, I was still listening to them then. And they had on this guy who was making audio drama podcast. And that sounded kind of cool, but it's for Christians. And they interviewed him and played his trailer. I'm like, oh, this is kind of cheesy. I don't know about this. I mean, all right, that's Spirit Blade something or other. Okay, well, yeah, I'm not gonna pay for that right now. So I just let it go. Continue listening to Sci-Fi Christian for a while. Stop listening to them eventually. I can ask why later, but I'm gonna carry on. Then late 2014, one day at work, I've burned through all my podcast episodes. I have nothing to listen to. And God just reminds me, hey, there's this thing called Spirit Blade. Why don't you look into that? And this isn't God vocalizing this or anything. I'm just saying this is him sort of, I don't know if you've ever just had like, oh, what? Just out of the blue, you think of something. And I when it seems to have these types of results, I attribute that to God. So God brought to mind what was that thing? The Spirit Sword or something? So I do a search on iTunes thinking, oh, maybe it's free now. Maybe that audio drama is free and I can just enjoy it for free. It wasn't free, but Peter created this still quiet voice. Exactly. Geek Devotions. Peter Franson, creator of Spirit Blade, had created a free novelization of the first part, which is turned out to be a little different than the audio drama. By listening to that, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. It was only him. It was him reading all the parts, but I'm like, this story is amazing. There's a free promo of the actual audio drama. Let me download that and listen to it. And at first I was like, this is a sci-fi musical? This is kind of weird. But I listened to that promo going home from work on my bike like every day for a week or more. And I'm like, I really want this. This is really cool. Eventually saved up, bought the first Spirit Blade, loved it. And then as I got the funds, I bought the rest of them, became a big fan of Spirit Blade, and got involved in what Christian Geek Central was doing. And then by 2015, that's when I was buying them. Then in 2017, big fan of Peter. And because of that, he did a video for someone called Geek Devotions. I'm like, what is this? Oh, it's Peter, though. I like Peter. Let's see what he did. So he did this thing for a couple people called Dallas and Celeste, this thing called the Geek Devotion. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So I watched Peter's Geek Devotion. It's really cool. I like it. Decided, I'll give some of these other Geek Devotions a try. Oh, these people seem cool. Oh, let me check out their website. Oh, they spelled something wrong, or they had some weird grammar in their YouTube About section. I'll tell them, and they may be like, geez, dude, lay off. It's just words, bro. And I'm like, this is me in my head. I try to like play all possibilities in my head so I'm not like hurt if one of these go poorly. I don't know if you do that. But so I let them know. I tweeted them or something, and they're super receptive. I'm like, oh, this is nice. Wow, okay, cool. And they change it, and then yeah, we start a relationship. Me and Paul, meanwhile, we're really enjoying doing Retro Rewind podcast, talking about movies, but we want to sort of return to that time back in college where we talked about sort of these speculative things about theology in movies, and decide to partner with Christian Geek Central to discuss God more and have him be a bigger role. And we start the Summer of Free Movie Club, Meanwhile, Dallas from Geek Devotions, we have this, so we're doing this movie club where people can join our Google Hangout to discuss the movie. He thinks he's joining the chat, and he ends up joining the Hangout. But he's totally quick on his feet, and I forget what movie we were talking about. Maybe Godzilla, like the 90s Godzilla. But it's really cool. Me and Paul getting to just hang out with him more, online albeit. And so that really helped form the relationship that Retro Rewind Podcast has with Geek Devotions. And yeah, it's really cool that God has used happy accents. God has used still small voices. And his last action hero, Geek Devotions. Okay, there we go. He says that was awkward. But yeah, I wouldn't have known. You did great. So it was is really cool. So 2017, this brings us all the way back around, back to where we started. I had been streaming sporadically, like I said, then seeing Pater, and I would watch Pater do it, and I'm like, oh, this is a cool thing. So when he, sent out that word, hey, would you want to be part of this? To everyone, not to me in particular, but just to everyone who is following Christian Geek Central, would you want to be a part of our team to raise money? I was like, yeah, God, I feel like this is the right time. And God blessed it. And that is the story of how I went from being a podcast listener to being a podcaster, streaming, doing this for you right now. If God had not started me off listening to that one podcast, I would not have started a podcast. I would not have gotten experience doing that. And if I had never met Paul, I never would have had someone to do a Retro Rewind podcast with. If I had never listened to Spirit Blade, given that a shot, probably wouldn't have been a fan of that. Probably never would have heard of Dallas and Celeste and Geek Devotions. Probably wouldn't be streaming right now, at least not in this fashion. I'd probably be streaming now, but for no one. I'd probably be talking to no one right now and be jaded about it. So it's really amazing how God is. I'm going to end with my last verse, which is from Psalm 37, 23 through 24. Again, the ESV. This is a Psalm of David. The steps of a man are established by the Lord when he delights in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be cast headlong, for the Lord upholds his hand. And I totally believe that. And sometimes I forget. I need that reminder. I need to remember how God has showed up, because that helps me in the times coming when things are dark and bleak and I'm like, why am I doing this thing? What's the point? It's remembering this stuff, having those stones in place that you can look back at and say, that's why. That's why. Because God shows up and he'll show up again. So thank you to Dallas and Celeste, Geek Devotions, Devoted Geeks. Join us over at Devoted Geek Life on Facebook. It's an awesome group. And thank you for, if you listen this long, oh my gosh, you are a champion, because I know this went long. But see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, I guess. Or just watch for the next Geek Devotions. And talk to you later. Bye.